Don't say that again. Elias Mercer's voice cut through the room like a blade wrapped in velvet, and every head in the pack hall turned at once. Audrey Bennett had barely finished saying, "You're not exactly hard on the eyes, Your Majesty," when the Alpha King crossed the floor, took her wrist, and guided her through the side door before anyone could stop him. The lock clicked behind them. Not slammed. Not rushed. Just quiet enough to make every heartbeat in Audrey's chest feel too loud. She stared at him. He stood there in a charcoal suit that looked custom-made to ruin her concentration, jaw tight, eyes fixed on her like he was trying to decide whether to breathe or break the rules. "You do not say things like that in front of my pack," he said. "Then maybe your pack should stop acting like I belong on display." Audrey shot back, even though her pulse had already betrayed her. For one strange second, the air between them shifted. It was subtle, almost invisible, but it hit her like static over skin. A mate bond. Not fully formed. Not safe. Just enough to make her stomach drop and her whole body go still. Elias noticed it too. His hand loosened on her wrist, then tightened again like he was angry at himself for reacting. Audrey took one step back. "What was that?" she whispered. "Nothing," he said too fast. That answer was a lie, and they both knew it. Outside the door, the pack hall had gone dead quiet. She could feel them listening. The ones who thought an Omega from records and archives had no business standing this close to an Alpha King. The ones who had laughed when she arrived with ink on her fingers and a stack of old ledgers under her arm. The ones who had called her plain, like it was an insult worth dressing up. Elias looked past her, toward the door, toward the noise, toward the pressure waiting outside. "You should not have been brought here," he said. Audrey let out a humorless laugh. "I wasn't brought here. I was summoned. There's a difference." His expression flickered. Not surprise. Recognition. Like he already knew exactly who had arranged this humiliation and was still trying to decide how far the damage had gone. Then she saw it. A folded envelope on the table behind him, half hidden under a silver seal. Royal crest. Emergency summons. The kind that did not invite questions. The kind that meant trouble had already reached the palace before the first bell. Audrey reached for it, but Elias caught her hand again, slower this time, his thumb brushing the inside of her wrist for one brief second. The touch sent another sharp pulse through her, undeniable now. His eyes widened just a fraction. So he felt it too. "Audrey," he said, and hearing her name in his mouth made the room feel smaller, warmer, and far more dangerous than before. "Whatever happens next, stay close to me." That sounds less like a suggestion and more like a problem. It is both. He opened the door, and the sound of the pack outside rolled in like thunder waiting to strike. The pack hall was exactly as Audrey feared, and somehow worse. Long tables, bright silver, faces that knew how to smile without meaning it. The second Elias opened the door, the room shifted around him like he was the center of gravity. Conversations died out. Chairs stopped scraping. Even the people pretending not to listen started listening. Audrey stepped in beside him, and she could feel the judgment land before anyone said a word. Some of it was simple curiosity. Most of it was worse than that. Surprise. Disapproval. A little amusement from the kind of people who had never had to work for anything in their lives. Elias did not let go of her wrist until they reached the head table, and by then the contact had become its own kind of statement. Not ownership. Not yet. Something sharper than that. Protection with teeth. "My king," said a man at the far end of the table, smooth as a polished knife. "I was not informed that the archives were now part of the royal audience chamber." Elias did not look at him right away. He helped Audrey to a chair first, as if the insult had not been spoken, as if the whole hall were beneath his notice. Then he finally turned. "You are informed now, Marcus." The beta straightened. The name alone told Audrey this was not a casual side of the pack. This was the inner circle. The people who knew every weakness, every family line, every old score. She sat with her back straight and her hands folded, refusing to look like prey. That made one of the women down the table smile faintly, like she had just found something new to dislike. Elias noticed. Of course he noticed. His jaw tightened once, then relaxed. "Audrey Bennett will be working under my authority," he said. "She has access to the records wing, the treaty vault, and any file I request." A murmur ran through the hall. It was not loud, but it was enough. Audrey heard the shape of it clearly enough. Too low-ranking. Too close to the king. Too unfamiliar. Elias ignored all of it. Marcus did not. With respect, Your Majesty, Marcus said. That is not a small change. Audrey almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so obviously the only honest sentence in the room. Elias leaned back in his chair. Then it is a good thing I did not ask for permission. Silence. Clean and cold. The kind that made people remember who held the crown. Audrey felt it then, again, that strange pull under her skin. Stronger now. Not a fantasy. Not nerves. Something real enough to make her fingers curl against her lap. Elias's eyes flicked to her for the briefest moment, and she knew he felt it too. A pulse. A recognition. A warning. Marcus saw the exchange and said nothing, but his expression changed. Just a little. Enough to tell Audrey he had noticed the bond before she had fully understood it herself. That made everything more dangerous. Elias turned to the room. No one speaks to her without speaking to me first. It was not a threat. It was worse. It was a rule. And in a pack like this, rules were how power showed its hand. Audrey looked down at the folded envelope still sitting near Elias's place, the royal seal half broken, the edge of another document peeking out underneath. Not an accident. Not decoration. Something urgent. Something hidden. She reached for it before thinking better of it. And this time Elias did not stop her. He watched her open the flap, watched her eyes move over the paper, and for the first time since she had met him, he looked genuinely uneasy. The letter was short. Formal. Too formal. It named a closed-door council session for that night, then listed one more line in tighter ink than the rest. The matter of the old blood claim had been confirmed. Audrey looked up slowly. What is the old blood claim? Elias did not answer right away. Around them, the room had gone so quiet she could hear the fire shifting in the wall hearth. Then he said, in a voice low enough to make the air feel heavier, something that should have stayed buried. Audrey read the line twice before she believed it the first time. The old blood claim had been confirmed. That was not the kind of sentence that belonged in a normal room, or a normal life, or a normal pack meeting. It sat there on the page like a match held too close to dry grass. Elias took the letter from her hand before she could ask for it back, but he did not fold it away. He just stood there with it in his fingers, staring at the seal as if he already hated whoever had sent it. Tell me that is not about me, Audrey said quietly. Elias let out one short breath through his nose. I cannot. That was worse than no. It was the kind of answer that meant the truth was already moving faster than the lie. Across the hall, Marcus watched them with the careful face of a man who had spent years managing damage before it started. He set down his fork. Your Majesty, he said. The council asked for confirmation because the line was traced again this morning. By who? Audrey asked. No one answered her. That silence told her enough. Somebody in the room knew more than they were saying, and it was not the first time. She looked from Marcus to Elias, then back to the letter in Elias's hand. You brought me here because of a file. Elias's eyes moved to hers, steady and unreadable. I brought you here because I did not want you hearing it from anyone else. That is supposed to make me feel better? No, he said. It is supposed to make me honest. Audrey almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. Honest would have been the first choice, not the emergency plan. The strange pull under her skin had not gone away. If anything, it was worse now, like every word from Elias was tightening some invisible thread between them. She hated that part most. Not the pull. The fact that her body noticed him before her pride could object. Elias leaned in just enough that only she could hear him. The old blood claim is a legal line tied to the founding families. It should have ended generations ago. Should have. Someone found a way to reopen it. Audrey looked back at the paper. There were terms on it she had seen before in old archives. Land rights. Court access. Pack succession. The kind of language people used when they wanted to turn a person into a problem. And where do I fit into that? Elias did not answer right away. He glanced at the doors, then at the line of council members seated farther down the hall, then back to her. You fit into it because someone in this pack has been hiding your name. Audrey went still. My name is not important enough for that. It is to me. The words landed harder than she expected. For a second, she could not tell whether the heat in her chest was anger or something more dangerous. Do not do that, she said. Do what? Say things like that, and then act like I am supposed to just stand here and believe you. Elias's face changed, just a little. Not offended. Hurt, maybe. Or tired. Then believe the part that matters, he said. Someone altered your record before you ever came near this house. Audrey stared at him. The room had gone soft around the edges, every sound distant except the rhythm of her own pulse. If her record had been changed, that meant this was not a random summons. This was planned. Someone had known exactly who she was before she walked through the door, and maybe even before she knew it herself. She lowered her voice. Why would anyone hide me? Elias's answer came after a beat. Because if the wrong people learn what line you come from, they will not see an Omega. They will see leverage. And for the first time since meeting him, Audrey understood that the lock on the side door had never been the real problem. The real danger was already inside the house. Audrey did not speak for a long second, because the words would not settle in her mouth. The wrong people would not see an Omega. They would see leverage. That was the sentence that stayed with her, not because it was dramatic, but because it sounded like something Elias had already watched happen to other people. She looked at him, trying to decide whether that made him safer or more dangerous. You knew, she said. Not everything, Elias replied. Enough. Enough to drag me into a private room and start locking doors. His jaw tightened. Enough to keep you from sitting in a hall full of wolves while they decided what to do with your life. Audrey took a slow breath through her nose. The room around them was still packed with polished silver, low voices, and the kind of attention that pretended not to stare. But now she could feel it differently. Not just judgment, calculation. A few people had gone very still when the letter was opened. That was what frightened her most. They were not surprised. They were confirming what they already suspected. Marcus set his glass down with careful precision. The council did not authorize this discussion to happen here, he said. That tells me it should not be happening anywhere, Audrey said before she could stop herself. A few heads turned. One woman near the end of the table gave a tiny, sharp smile, like Audrey had just proven a point she had hoped to make. Elias looked at Audrey for a beat, and something passed between them again, quick and heated and hard to ignore. Not comfort. Not yet. Recognition. There is more to the record than the file you saw, he said quietly. There always is, Audrey said. In this house, apparently. Elias moved first, not toward her, but toward the far side of the hall where a narrow cabinet of bound ledgers stood behind a carved screen. He pulled one volume free, then another. The motion was calm, but Audrey saw the tension in his shoulders. This was not routine. This was a man reaching for proof before the room could turn the story into a weapon. He opened the ledger, scanned a page, and handed it to her without a word. Audrey took it, and her eyes narrowed at once. The lines were old, but the correction was newer. One name had been scraped out and replaced with another in a different hand. Not clumsy. Deliberate. This was altered, she said. Yes. By whom? Elias's stare went to the council seats, then to Marcus, then away. That was answer enough. Marcus looked offended, which only made Audrey trust him less. You think I did this? He asked. Elias did not blink. I think someone close to the throne did. Silence fell again, tighter this time. Audrey looked at the page, then at the seal on the earlier letter, then back at Elias. Her pulse had not settled once. If anything, it had started to feel like it belonged to the room now, like the whole pack could hear it. So what now? She asked. Elias stepped closer, just enough for her to catch the clean, cold scent of him under the room's heat. Now, he said, you stay where I can see you. She gave him a flat look. That is not a plan. It is for tonight. And after that, he said, voice lower, we find out who changed your record, why they did it, and how deep this goes. Audrey should have hated how steady he sounded. Instead, it made the fear feel sharper. Real fear had edges. It had names. It had paperwork. It had people in the room pretending not to listen. Audrey held the ledger a little tighter. You still have not told me what line I come from. Elias's expression changed, just enough to make her chest tighten. No, he said. And I am starting to think the reason is that it reaches higher than either of us expected. The next morning, Audrey found out that being watched could feel worse than being touched. She had barely stepped into the records wing when two pack attendants fell silent. Then a third pretended to reorganize a stack of folders that did not need reorganizing. Nobody said her name. Nobody had to. The room already knew she had become a problem. Elias was waiting at the far table, sleeves rolled to his forearms, a line of old ledgers spread open in front of him. He looked like he had not slept, which did not make him look weaker. It made him look more dangerous. You should not be here alone, he said. Audrey set her satchel down with more force than necessary. I am not the one hiding in the archive wing like a guilty man. One corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile, but it did not last. We have a council session at noon. You said that last night. And I meant it then too. Audrey stepped closer, lowering her voice. You still have not told me why the room goes quiet when I walk in. Elias shut the ledger. Because they know more than they admit. That is not an answer. It is the best one I have until I can prove the rest. Before she could push again, a sharp knock sounded at the doorway. Marcus entered without waiting for permission, his face flat in the way people wore when they were bringing bad news and had already accepted the blame. Your Majesty, he said. The council has requested that Miss Bennet not attend the noon session. Audrey felt the insult land before Elias moved. Not because she cared about the title, but because the message was clear. She was not to be allowed in the room where her own life was being discussed. Requested by whom? Elias asked. Marcus did not answer fast enough. Elias's eyes narrowed. Say it. Marcus gave a tired exhale. Lord Halden, Lady Sarah, and 2 others. They said her presence would be a distraction. Audrey gave a dry, humorless laugh. Of course they did. Elias stood. Not fast. Not dramatic. Worse than that. Controlled. She is not a distraction, he said. She is the subject. Marcus looked uneasy now, and that was the first sign the room had started tilting in Audrey's favor. There is more, he added. The outer families are talking. They think the old blood claim may force a succession review if the line is verified. Audrey's stomach tightened. Succession review? Elias did not look away from Marcus. They are trying to turn you into a legal argument. Audrey stared at him. And you still think the best move is to keep me close? Yes, he said. Because now it is no longer just your record that is missing. It is your protection. Marcus cleared his throat, but neither of them paid attention. Audrey looked down at the ledgers again, at the scraped-out names and the careful corrections, and suddenly the room felt colder. Someone had hidden her. Then someone had gone to the trouble of making sure she stayed hidden. That meant there had been time. Planning. Fear. Maybe even guilt. If they are talking about succession, Audrey said slowly, then this started before I ever came here. Elias nodded once. That is what I am afraid of. The words hung there between them, plain and honest and heavier than anything he had said so far. Audrey should have stepped back. Instead, she asked the one question that made the air tighten. Would you still have locked the door if you knew all of this? Elias looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, quiet enough that Marcus had to look away. Yes. But not because I wanted to keep you in. Audrey held his gaze. Then why? His answer came after a beat, honest in the worst possible way. Because every instinct I have says the people outside that door would rather use you than protect you. And for the first time, Audrey understood that his possessiveness was not the whole story. It was protection twisted into something rougher, something he did not know how to handle without making it sound like a command. Audrey knew something had shifted the moment she walked into the records wing and found the room already waiting for her. Not waiting politely, waiting like people do before bad news. 2 clerks stopped talking. One attendant lowered his eyes too fast. And at the far table, Elias was standing with his hands braced on the edge of a ledger, his face set in that hard, unreadable way that meant he had already spent the morning fighting with people who thought they were clever. Tell me, Audrey said, keeping her voice even. Why does it feel like everybody in this house heard something before I did? Elias looked up. Because they probably did. That is a terrible answer. It is also true. She crossed the room and set her satchel down with a thud that made the nearest attendant flinch. Elias noticed that too. Of course he did. And his eyes flicked to the bag, then to her face. You slept, he asked. Audrey gave him a look. Did you? No. Then we are both having a lovely morning. A faint breath left him, almost a laugh, but it vanished before it could become one. That was Elias Mercer in a nutshell. A man who could command a room without raising his voice, and somehow still look like the weight of the crown had teeth. Before Audrey could press him further, Marcus entered with a sealed folder tucked under one arm and the expression of a man carrying a mess he did not create. Your Majesty, he said, the council has moved the noon session up by an hour. Elias's jaw tightened. Why? Marcus hesitated just long enough for Audrey to know she was not going to like the answer. Because Lord Halden heard the outer families are asking whether the old blood claim can be verified before the winter assembly. Audrey went still. They are really doing this now. Marcus opened the folder and slid out a second paper. They are also asking whether Miss Bennet should be removed from the residence until the matter is settled. Audrey stared at him. Removed. Marcus looked uncomfortable. That was their word, not mine. Elias took the paper, read it once, and set it down like he was trying very hard not to throw it across the room. They do not get to decide where she lives. They believe she changes the balance of the pack, Marcus said. And there it is, Audrey muttered. That sounds like a threat dressed as policy. Elias turned to her. It is. Audrey folded her arms. Then say that out loud in the council room. I plan to. Good. She looked him straight in the eye. Because I am tired of being discussed like a file they forgot to burn. That landed. She could see it. Elias's expression changed, just a little, and the room seemed to tighten around it. He stepped closer, then stopped himself before he got too near. That restraint mattered more than any dramatic gesture. It told her he was trying, even if he was not good at trying cleanly. You will come with me, he said. To the council? Yes. Audrey shook her head once. They already said they did not want me there. And I said they were not in charge of you. That made Marcus look away, which was probably for the best, because Audrey felt the heat rise in her chest, and she was not ready to name it. Not anger. Not only anger. There was something worse in the way Elias kept choosing her when it would be simpler to protect the room's peace instead. You keep saying things like that, she said, and acting like a command is the same thing as trust. Elias's gaze held hers for a long beat. No, he said quietly. Trust is what I am trying to earn. Outside the records wing, a bell began to ring for the council call. Slow. Formal. Final. Audrey looked at the papers on the table, at the altered names, at the sealed folder, and then back at Elias. Whatever was waiting in that room, it had already reached inside their lives. Fine, she said at last. But if they try to turn me into leverage, I will not sit there and smile. Elias's mouth moved in something close to approval. Good, he said. I would be disappointed if you did. The council room was colder than Audrey expected, and not because of the stone walls. It was the kind of cold that came from people deciding, in advance, that you did not belong at their table. She felt it the second she stepped inside. Long polished wood. Heavy chairs. Too many eyes. Elias walked in beside her without hesitation, and that alone changed the room's balance. Half the council looked irritated. The other half looked nervous. Audrey kept her chin level and took the empty chair Elias pulled out for her, even though she could feel every person in the room measuring how far she had already fallen from their idea of respect. Lord Halden sat at the far end with both hands folded like he had invented patience. Lady Sarah did not bother hiding her expression. Marcus stood behind Elias's right shoulder, rigid and tired, the face of a man who had already survived several arguments before lunch. We will begin, Halden said, with the matter of the old blood claim. Audrey heard the words and felt her stomach tighten. Elias did not move. No, he said. The room went still. Halden blinked once. No. She stays, Elias said, his voice calm enough to be more dangerous than shouting. If you are discussing her name, her record, or her place in this pack, then she stays. A murmur moved around the table. Audrey felt the weight of it, but she did not flinch. Your Majesty, Lady Sarah said with a smile that did not reach her eyes. This is a private council matter. Then you should have kept it private, Elias replied. Audrey looked at him then, really looked at him, because there was something different in the way he stood. He was not posturing. He was choosing. Before anyone could answer, Marcus opened a folder and placed a stack of ledgers on the table. The archives confirmed the record changes, he said. The alteration was made 8 years ago. The original line was removed, and the new entry was signed by someone with access to the inner seal. Audrey's pulse jumped. Who? She asked. Marcus did not look at her when he answered. That is what we are here to establish. Halden's fingers tapped once against the wood. This does not prove intent. No, Elias said, but it proves tampering. Audrey sat very still. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out the copy she had kept since the night before, the one with the scraped name and the newer ink. She laid it on the table between them. And this proves someone expected me to stay quiet, she said. The room looked at her. Really looked. Not as a nuisance. Not as decoration. As a person who had done her homework. Elias's eyes flicked to the page, then back to her face. Something warm and sharp passed through the air between them. The mate bond. Stronger now. Harder to ignore. Not a sweet little spark. A pull with teeth. Lady Sarah folded her hands. Miss Bennet, are you claiming to be part of a buried line? Audrey met her eyes. I am claiming that somebody in this house thought I was important enough to hide. That hit harder than silence. Holden leaned back. And if that is true, it changes the succession balance of the pack. There it is, Audrey said, her voice steady. You do not care that the record was altered. You care what it costs you. Marcus looked like he wanted to object, but Elias lifted one hand, and he stopped. The gesture was small. The room obeyed it anyway. Enough, Elias said. This stops now. Holden's face hardened. You cannot simply erase 8 years of legal order because you have taken an interest in 1 Omega. Audrey felt the insult rise, but Elias spoke first. I am not taking an interest, he said. I am correcting a lie. No one spoke after that. Even the fire seemed quieter. Elias turned to Audrey, and for the first time in the room, his expression softened just enough to be honest. Whatever they say next, he said, low enough for only her to hear, do not forget this. They are afraid because the truth is close. Audrey held his gaze, and despite everything, despite the cold room and the staring counsel and the paper trail that had led her here, she believed him. Not because she trusted the room, because she did not. She believed him because he had finally stopped sounding like a king and started sounding like a man choosing a side. Audrey did not speak for a few seconds after the council room fell quiet, because for the first time since she had walked into that house, nobody was pretending anymore. No polished excuses. No careful half-truths. Just the raw shape of the problem sitting in the middle of the table, impossible to ignore. Elias stood beside her without moving, one hand resting on the back of her chair like he was grounding himself as much as her. Holden had gone stiff with outrage. Lady Sarah was staring at the papers as if they had personally offended her, and Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear into the stone floor. That alone told Audrey how far the room had shifted. Elias broke the silence first. The record was altered. The line was hidden, and the people who did it knew exactly what they were doing. Holden's voice came sharp and cold. You are making a reckless mistake, Your Majesty. Elias turned his head slowly. No, I am correcting one. Audrey glanced at him, and the tension in her chest eased by a fraction. Not because the room was safe. It was not. But because he was no longer speaking like a man trapped inside his own pride. He was speaking like someone willing to take the hit. That mattered more than anything else so far. Marcus cleared his throat. There is another issue, he said. The inner seal used on the altered ledger is not supposed to leave the archive office. Audrey looked at him. So somebody close to the throne had access. Marcus did not answer, which was answer enough. Holden leaned forward. You are all making this sound like a conspiracy when it may simply be administrative confusion. Audrey let out a quiet laugh, tired and dry. Administrative confusion does not erase a person's identity for 8 years. That hit the room like a slap. Lady Sarah looked away first. Elias did not. He looked directly at Audrey, and there was something different in him now, something stripped down and unarmored. I should have told you sooner, he said. The room seemed to shrink around the words. Audrey stared at him. It would have been easier if he had not said it. Easier to stay angry. Easier to keep everything neat and sharp. But he had said it anyway, in front of the council, in front of the people who had spent the last hour trying to turn her into leverage. You kept saying you were protecting me, she said quietly. And maybe you were. I was, Elias replied. And I was also wrong. That was the first real apology she had heard from him. Not the kind wrapped in power. Not the kind that sounded like a favor. Just the plain truth, offered without armor. Audrey felt something shift inside her, slow and reluctant. Not surrender. Not yet. But the edge of the wall she had built around him had started to crack. Elias took one step closer, but he stopped before touching her. I did not trust anyone else with this, he said. That is not the same as trusting you enough. I know that now. Audrey held his gaze. Around them, the council remained frozen, waiting for her reaction as if she held the outcome in her hands. Maybe she did. I did not need you to be perfect, she said. I needed you to be honest. Something in his face softened, painful and real. Then let me start there. He turned back to the table and placed both palms flat on the wood. We will reopen the record. We will identify who altered it. And until then, Miss Bennet remains under my protection and under this roof. Holden opened his mouth, but Elias did not let him speak. If anyone in this room believes she is only a political inconvenience, they are welcome to leave now. Nobody moved. That was its own kind of answer. Audrey looked at the room one more time. The same people who had stared at her like she was a problem were now forced to sit with the possibility that she had been erased on purpose. It was not justice yet, not even close, but it was the first crack in the wall. And standing beside Elias, with the mate bond humming low and stubborn between them, Audrey realized something she had not wanted to admit before. He was not just trying to keep her near him anymore. He was choosing to stand with her, even if it cost him the crown's comfortable lies. By the time the sun dropped low over the pack house, the whole place had started to feel different. Not safer. Never that. Just more honest. Audrey stood in the archive corridor with a fresh copy of the restored ledger in her hands while Elias spoke with the council in the chamber across the hall. The door was open this time. Not wide. Just enough. Enough for everyone to hear what was being said, which was the point. No one was allowed to hide behind sealed rooms anymore. Marcus had spent the last hour cross-checking records with 2 senior archivists, and the answer had finally come back clean and ugly at the same time. The altered line had not been a random clerical mistake. It had been changed on purpose by Lord Halden's predecessor, a man who had feared that Audrey's bloodline could expose an old claim tied to the founding families. Not because Audrey was weak, because she was too important to leave in the open. "You buried her name to protect your own influence," Elias said, his voice carrying into the corridor with cold precision. "And then you called it order." Halden said nothing for a second, which was the loudest answer in the room. Then he tried, one last time, to dress greed up as duty. The pack could not afford another succession crisis. Audrey stepped into the doorway before Elias could answer. Every head turned. She did not rush. She did not apologize for entering. She looked at Halden first, then at the rest of the room, and finally at Elias. "You were right about one thing," she said. "People like me do get turned into leverage when the wrong people are scared." Halden's mouth tightened. "That is not what this is." "It is exactly what this is," Audrey said. "You hid my record because my existence threatened the balance you liked." Elias moved to her side, not in front of her. That mattered. "The balance was built on a lie," he said. "And it ends tonight." He reached for the restored ledger, opened it, and held it up where everyone in the chamber could see the clean line of Audrey's true name. Not a rumor, not a threat, a fact. The room went still. Then Marcus spoke, quietly but clearly. "The outer families will not like this." Elias did not even glance at him. "They do not have to like it. They have to accept it." Audrey felt something settle in her chest then, something she had not expected to feel inside a room full of power and old fear. Not victory. Not exactly. More like belonging without surrender. Halden stood slowly, looking older than he had that morning. "And what do you intend to do with her claim?" he asked. Elias turned to Audrey before he answered. "Nothing," he said, "unless she wants it." That landed harder than any decree in the room. No one spoke. Not even the counselors who had spent all day trying to make her into a political object. Audrey looked at Elias, really looked at him, and saw the difference between possession and devotion for the first time without any doubt at all. Possession locked doors. Devotion opened them and stayed near. She drew a slow breath. "I do not want a throne," she said. "I want my name back." Elias nodded once. "Then that is what you get." He faced the council again. "Audrey Bennett will not be hidden, removed, or spoken over in this house again. Her record is restored. Her place is restored. And any decision about her future will be hers alone." It was not a speech built to impress the room. It was a line in the sand. Audrey saw it all at once then, the whole shape of him. The king who had started by locking a door because he did not know how to trust, and had ended by standing in front of his own council and choosing truth over comfort. The alpha who had learned that real strength was not control. It was restraint. It was honesty. It was knowing when to step back and let an omega stand in her own name. Later, long after the chamber emptied and the last of the papers had been signed, Audrey found Elias out on the terrace where the cold air smelled like rain and stone. He was looking out over the grounds, shoulders loose for the first time all day. "You could have kept the claim quiet," she said. "Saved yourself the trouble." Elias glanced at her, and this time there was no guarded wall behind his eyes. "Yes," he said, "but then I would have kept lying to you." Audrey came to stand beside him. The mate bond between them had changed too. It was still there, still strong, but it no longer felt like a trap. It felt like a choice being made again and again. You know what the strange part is? She said. What? I did not need you to make me important. I needed you to stop acting like I was disposable. Elias was quiet for a moment. Then he said, and I needed you to remind me that a king is not measured by how tightly he can hold on. The wind moved across the terrace. Somewhere below them, the pack went on with its usual noise, its usual hierarchy, its usual imperfect life. Audrey looked out at it, and then back at Elias. There was still work ahead. There always would be. Politics. Repair. The slow, stubborn task of rebuilding trust inside a house that had spent years feeding on fear. But tonight, at least, the truth had room to breathe. Audrey lifted her chin. No more locked doors, she said. Elias's answer came with a faint, tired smile. Only if you are the one opening them.